So here's how my adventures in the web all began. They began a few years ago. I just finished a big project at work, and so I was actually looking for something new to work on. So one of my colleagues came up to me, and he said, "Hey, James, do you want to jump on board to this JavaScript project?" And because I was foolish and naive, I actually said yes, not understanding what this would actually mean. So I went to the bookstore, and I purchased this book called JavaScript, the Definitive Guide. And I started to read this book. And now at first, I thought that this book was going to be like any other programming book. There's going to be some syntax, a few examples, a list of APIs, and so on. But as I read this book, I realized it was like a Japanese game show. I was cast into this strange world that I didn't understand, and I was forced to compete in these games of wit and strength that made no sense. The JavaScript language basically is like being inside an insane person's brain. It was very disturbing. So let me give you an example of how weird it was. So what is a JavaScript array? Okay, very simple question. Now, I've programmed in many languages, as I'm sure that you have, and we've used arrays in all of these languages. I am a friend of arrays. I go to the park with arrays. We play games together. An array married my cousin, okay? I know all about arrays. I feel very comfortable with them. So I feel like this part of JavaScript should be easy. Of course, I was tragically mistaken. See, here's the kind of array that I'm used to dealing with. Okay, so you declare an array, you use the bracket notation, I specify a size for the array, and then my computer very helpfully allocates a contiguous block of memory for the array. Then I can just put things in that memory, and then everything works out. It's a great story, right? Everybody loves it. Presumably, JavaScript arrays work the same way, right? Foolish mortal. No, of course they don't work that way. Don't ever take knowledge from the regular world and try to apply it to JavaScript. That will never work. JavaScript is a dangerous beast that you have to attack directly. To understand the tiger, you must become the tiger. Okay? You must wear its skin. Okay? Now, for some reason, you also have to wear Spider-Man underwear. That's weird. I'm going to do some research. I'm going to get back to you on why that exactly is taking place. So anyways, so let's talk about how JavaScript arrays work. But before I do that, can we just focus on this font for a second? Why does PowerPoint even have this font? Like in real life, when am I ever going to need to use a font that is appropriate for describing the intonation of a wizard? You know, this doesn't really make any sense. I hope that Microsoft didn't pay any money to license that font. Like if we paid more than $0, that's going to be problematic come fiscal year review time. But that being said, it is very entertaining to write serious messages in the style of a wizard. So, for example, you didn't find my unit tests? It's because I didn't write any. The mobile version of the page is the desktop version of the page. I haven't tested anything on IE, but it should just work. So anyways, what is a JavaScript array? Let's get back to the original question. So you declare an empty array, all right? So that's fine so far. And then you go and you want to print the length. And so that says 0, right? So that makes sense. And then you want to go ahead and print what's at index 3. And now that's actually going to throw an array's bound index exception because the array has no elements. Oh no, wait. It doesn't actually do that, right? So it prints undefined. So that's curious. But surely, if I directly assign to index 3, then the world is going to blow up, right? Because this is an empty array, right? It doesn't have an index 3. However, nothing happens. You just get silence. Okay, so let me just go over here now, try to print out the length. Okay, so now I get 4, even though I've only added 1 element. Okay, I'm a scientist, let's work this out. Okay, so maybe arrays are just like regular objects, but if an object has numerical properties, then its length is set to 1 plus the largest property. So maybe that kind of makes sense. So if arrays are just regular objects with numerical properties, so I should be able to print out r.3, right? Well, but then I can't, because that's a syntax error. Okay, so that's interesting. So maybe arrays are not objects that have these numeric properties. So that's why this line should fail, right? Because objects can't have numeric. So that actually works. Okay, so if you do have a number property that's surrounded by quotes and passed to the bracket operator, that apparently is fine. Okay, so I'm tired of this index 3. It's been giving me nothing but trouble. Let me just delete that guy. Okay, so this doesn't seem to cause any problems. Now, if I print the length of the array, it should be 0. Nope, it's 4. Okay, that's weird. Well, if I print what's at the index 3, Well, it's going to give me undefined, which makes sense because I already deleted that guy. But hold on, but back when array 3 was undefined up here and the length was 0, but then at the bottom, this array length is now 4. So what? What just happened here? So I read this chapter, and I basically determined that JavaScript arrays are best described as arrayless dictionary combined multi-type objects. Because they basically have features from all of those data types, and they remember things that they shouldn't remember, and they just really make me feel uncomfortable. And so let me also take a note here that I'm reading this O'Reilly book. I'm only on chapter 7 of 22, okay? And already I'm just in a world of pain. And so one thing I want you to note here in this table of contents is this delightful subsection entitled Array-like Objects, as if regular arrays weren't already array-like enough. And so in this chapter, you'll find a sentence like this. It is often perfectly reasonable to treat any object with a numeric length property and corresponding non-negative integer properties as a kind of array. These array-like objects actually do occasionally appear in practice. So how many weasel words can we fit into a single sentence, right? Often, perfectly reasonable, a kind of, array-like, actually do occasionally. That makes me want to drink bleach, okay? In practice. Like, in what real-world situation would you accept someone talking to you like this? Like, you wouldn't go to a bank, and then the banker says, it is often perfectly reasonable to believe that I haven't spent your retirement fund on cocaine and helicopter rides. I actually do occasionally leave your money in your account, instead of using it to buy fancy racehorses that I can't ride because there are no fancy racehorse riding instructors in my neighborhood. Think of your retirement fund as investment-like account that in practice might not be ruined if I accidentally disclose your account information to a Hong Kong gangster known as Mr. Payne. So clearly nobody wants to hear this from a banker, but for some reason we're okay with these words being used to describe a scripting language that runs banking websites super oh no, right? I'd really like for my online financial transactions to be implemented in a programming language that actually knows what an array is. That seems like a useful thing. However, perhaps I'm being too dramatic. Let me just continue my story about how I learned all about JavaScript. So I'm reviewing the information in the book about how objects work, and so I decided to code up a little example. So in this first example, I just wrote a simple function that returns an object literal. Okay, seems pretty straightforward. Now when I execute that alert statement at the bottom, I get what I expect, right? So it returns the object literal that I created. So this example fills me with clearly a foolish amount of confidence. So I decide on a whim that I just want to move the opening brace of the object literal to a different line, okay? I don't know why, I just want to do that. It just seems like a thing I could do. It was a Tuesday, I was feeling weird, okay? So that's the only change that I made. So then I run the alert statement at the bottom, and this time it prints undefined. What just happened, okay? So I dig around the O'Reilly book some more, and I discover the following information. In JavaScript, you can usually omit the semicolon between two statements if those statements are written on separate lines. But JavaScript does not treat every line as a semicolon. It usually treats line breaks as semicolons only if it can't parse the code without the semicolons. But if a line break appears after return break or continue, JavaScript will always interpret that line break as a semicolon. What the deleted expletive am I reading? Okay, am I hallucinating this? Am I having a stroke? Am I reading a book that was written by the devil? What poor life decisions did I make that led me to encountering a sentence like that? Y'all need to pray for me, okay? Because clearly I have trouble in my life if I'm encountering sentences like this. And also, let me just say, if you're a JavaScript programmer and you actually rely on automatic semicolon insertion, if hitting the semicolon key is too much work for you, you're lazy and you're going to get diabetes, okay? For sure. There's no question about that. It's like, who's going to win the World Cup next time? I don't know. Germany? Maybe. Colombia? Maybe. But are you going to get diabetes because you're too lazy to type in a semicolon? Yes, definitely. It's going to happen to you, and I'm telling you what's going to happen to you, okay? It's a problem. Anyways, This concept of automatic semicolon insertion is like super, super weird. It just makes me feel strange. I don't like the fact that there's this object that's in my code just hanging around. Like maybe it's there, maybe it's not there. It's just strange. It's almost like not knowing whether Lionel Richie is in the room right now. You know? It's like if Lionel Richie is here, then I want to talk to him and I want to be like, why are you here? I didn't invite you here, you know? And it's like if he's not here, then I want to be confident that he's not here. I don't want to deal with some type of quantum mechanics Lionel Richie, like he's simultaneously here and he's not here. That's strange. So things like this really stress me out. And this is why I don't like code reviews for JavaScript, right? So my coworker will say, all right, James, let's start this code review. Are you feeling okay? You don't look too good. And I'll say, no, I just feel like Lionel Richie is here. I just really feel that he's here. And then she'll say, like in the room? Like he's actually in the room? I'll say, no, I just feel that Lionel Richie is just like here, like in the code. I just feel he's in my JavaScript program. That's how I feel. Those are my feelings. And you can't take them from me. And then she'll say, okay, but just to be clear, there weren't a lot of black people in Tron, so I doubt that Lionel Richie somehow managed to insert himself into your code. And that's a valid point. There weren't a lot of black people in Tron, but she didn't prove that Lionel Richie wasn't there, so he could still be there. He's like the Taliban. He never sleeps, this guy, okay? He's always probing for weakness. So anyway, so I read this whole book, right? And I learned all about JavaScript. And just to be very, very clear, this is actually a really good book, right? So this is the only book that I recommend to people when they ask me, what should I read if I want to learn about JavaScript? It's not this book's fault that it's describing a nightmare world.